Serious? Hey Reddit, what was your thank god I looked at the contract moment? Was in a rental sublease at an apartment room where the tenants were trying to get me to pay for the months I was vacated if I could not find a replacement. I asked for a copy of the lease because the sublease had ended and they were citing the old lease rather than the new one. The tenants would not provide one, sending me the old lease. The property management wouldn't send me one, even after multiple requests from her answers emails immediately agent. 2 days before the rent was due, the agent finally sends me the new lease after I send a stern email with legalese phrases. Turned out I wasn't even on the lease at all, a subletter or tenant, and based on tenancy laws, I could just leave if I was vacated and gave notice. I gave 2 months notice, so I left. My last restaurant job had a non-competition clause in the new handbook. I pointed it out to co-workers. Few signed, and it was revised in a week. I signed up for a gym membership on a whim and got sketched out when they initially charged me $250 instead of only the $90 for the month. I went home and legit didn't sleep because I was so mad I went through with it. I called and asked the next day to see if I could cancel and almost everyone I spoke to said either no it was impossible or only if I moved to an area that didn't have the gym. I checked the contract and you could cancel within the first 2 weeks and I was only 3 days into the contract. You bet your butt I cancelled so fast. Was sent a freelance contract for a job offer in the media industry. I was a graduate at the time with 2 years experience. Was offered £6.50 hourly pay and with the expectation that I must be available to work 37.5 hours per week. I had to use my own car for business purposes, but couldn't claim expenses for fuel mileage. And above all, the contract demanded full rights for the company to use any creative works I produced within 2 years before the start date of the position. I didn't accept the job. When I bought my car new 3 years ago, the finance department processed and had me sign paperwork at a certain price. Then they called me 3 days later and told me that their lender fell through and I would actually have to pay an additional $100 a month. I brought in the paperwork with the price I signed for and the keys. Told them they would stick to the contract or they could have their car back with the additional mileage. Apparently this is a fairly common practice at car dealerships. Beware. I moved into my worst ever apartment complex. They had too small of a staff. The maintenance guys looked unprofessional, and I was burglarized. When I was burglarized, the temporary person working the property from another apartment complex wasn't sensitive at all to me and asked me to provide my renter's insurance information to pay for the damage to the door and building. I don't think she knew how this works. Well, understand I was counting down the days until my lease was up. I submitted the required 45 days notice and found a better place to live. The property contacted me and told me they were happy to accept my notice and that I'd be out in June. This was March. Told them no, my lease was up April. They told me according to my lease, I still had 2 more months. I told them to show me. I had signed a 10-month lease, not a 12-month lease. They were certain the lease was 12 months, but they didn't produce the lease. They gave me a copy of their standard lease. I had to do some digging but I found my copy of the lease I signed. 10 months. Definitely research management companies' owners before moving into a property. Also, keep a copy of your own lease handy and read it. I had to pull mine out a few times when I lived in a certain place, and I was glad I kept it within easy reach. Toyota was going to give me a $750 college rebate and 1.9% APR for 60 months for my truck. Finance comes to talk saying I suddenly don't qualify for the rebate and if I did take the rebate offer I'd have a 5% APR rate and said to purchase the truck without the rebate at 3.5% APR. Luckily I'm not stupid and looked through the rebate's fine print prior to walking in. I told them to show me where in the fine print where it said I would have to pay that interest rate and why. The guy said sure he would show me. Obviously couldn't find it. He walked away and came back and said I actually do qualify for the rebate and low percent APR. So yeah, Richard, if you're reading this, frick you. You'd think that there would be money with ex-car salespeople charging car buyers to go with them and do battle for them on buying a car. I had taken some helicopter flying lessons and was considering switching careers to that. So I found a flight school and applied for a student loan. Fannie Mae was the only one that would cover it. And when I got the final paperwork, The interest rate was higher than they told me over the phone and the total payment to them was going to be well over $200,000. So I cancelled and didn't go to flight school. I meant Sally Mae. Frick Sally Mae. The amount of times I've heard about them harassing their students for no reason is insane. Not to mention that their rates are super high. At my high school, they set up Wi-Fi for us to use. However, in the terms of service, it said that by signing into the network, the school had permission to search the phone and look at its contents. I did not sign in, and have not to this day. My wife and I were at a car dealership buying our first car. The dealership was offering special no-interest financing for recent college grads and we were using that to finance the car. The finance guy presented us with two options, a 3-year payment plan and a 5-year payment plan. The whole time he made it sound like the zero interest applied to both and so we went for the 5-year plan to get a lower payment. Finance guy tries to get us to sign without reading the paperwork, but we weren't having that. Come to find out the longer payment plan didn't qualify for the no interest deal and we were getting charged 6.5%, which is a heck of a lot more than zero. We got pissy and threatened to walk out after we realized what they were trying to pull and got them to come down on the price. I know they've pulled that on other recent grads who don't read the paperwork and just sign. I briefly dated a car salesman and all around shady dude for a while when I was fresh out of college. They used to call the deals where they were able to con someone into paying more interest-wise a head crack and these victories would be well celebrated in the back rooms of the dealerships. As a result, I always walk into the dealership with my own financing from my bank. Went to pick up my car from the dealership and it said by signing the paperwork it gave them permission to lend my information to third parties. Nope. Some workplace that demanded at least 4 years of employment or else I would have had to pay for those 4 years as you would pay for a course, in case of earlier quitting. How? Landlord agreed to let me move out a month early since he wanted to lease the apartment to someone else. We had to sign new paperwork to let me out of the original lease and to make me agree to be out by an earlier date. I knew he was a recently convicted forger, so I made sure to read what I was signing. He'd added the condition that if anything fell through with the new tenant that I would still be on the hook for rent after I moved out. I called him out on it, and he said oh yeah I just added that part to protect myself. Then he stole my deposit. I still need to take him to court for that. Frick you John. Okay, you all convinced me. I've got a few more months before the statute of limitations is up. Just left him one final voicemail and will proceed with the civil case if I don't get my check by the end of this week. Do it already, make him pay. Do it for all of us who love you. We were in the process of selling our business. My wife's car was registered under business. We sat down with our lawyer to discuss what is included in the sale, equipment, supplies etc. And we clearly told him the car is not included in the sale. Well guess what, we received the typed up contract from our lawyer and he had added the car along with other things. Thank God we read it and had it removed before signing it and sending to buyer's lawyer. Mine wasn't really extreme but my GF and I were shopping for houses and we were checking out a townhouse style condominium. The price was within our budget and the monthly maintenance fees were average for the area. It was an open house event hosted by a retailer so the property's annual expenses were included in a pamphlet. I found that on top of the regular monthly maintenance fees, around $350, there was an additional expense of $800 every 6 months. I asked why there was an additional expense if there were already regular fees. She responded that the extra $1,600 per year was used to keep the fees low. I responded that the fees are average for the area and many places in the same neighborhood are already lower. Long story short, it was a nice house but we didn't pursue it further. I'm on board with the idea of condo fees if they cover things that I would normally pay for like heat, water, snow removal, garden care etc, and if needed additional expenses for major upgrades like new roofs or doors, windows. But expecting 12 houses in the row complex to each kick in a $1,600 bonus every year without specific accountability isn't something that interests me. Hey, we keep the fees low most of the year so you can make up the difference every few months. First time renter here. Moved out of uni res to get my own place so I could take my family cat. Found a nice little apartment for cheap downtown. Intended to move in with a roommate or two to split the cost, close friends of mine. The landlord didn't speak English very well, so although he insisted, "Oh yeah, everything good, everything okay," I wasn't sure he understood what I wanted. When he brought out the contract, it said in writing that pets were not allowed, and the cost would increase for more people living there. I pointed it out to him, but he retorted to the effect of, "I use this contract for all tenants. Those rules don't apply to you." Bull. I told him I wasn't signing unless he rewrote the contract, but he refused, saying he wasn't going to waste time pandering to paranoid people. I offered to write the contract myself and was baffled that he agreed to it. So I wrote up my own contract with super lenient conditions, making sure to protect my own butt. Had a lawyer look at it and notarize it, and now I'll live with my cat and roommates at the original cost. It sounds like he wasn't trying to screw you and was simply ignorant of how contracts work in comparison to conversations. Went to buy a new phone for $200. The employee told me they were closing soon and asked if I could come back the next day to sign the paperwork. The $200 mysteriously changed to $300 while the document was sitting in a desk overnight. Called them out on it and got it from somewhere else. Buying my house. Husband signed the paperwork and I went in later that day to sign. I started to read through the loan application. Mortgage lender said, "What are you doing? You don't have to read it. Your husband already signed it." I was like, "No, I want to make sure it is what I want." Loan was a $250,000 at 25%. Yeah, right. Didn't sign it and got out of there. Mortgage guy said he was going to take me to court. I said go ahead, it would be cheaper than what he wanted me to sign. Took over all the mortgage stuff from then on. Mortgage guy was a friend of a high school friend of my husband. Just talked to my husband. The man who tried to sell us on this mortgage got busted and arrested. Lost everything and had to have his parents bail him out. Also, the mortgage lender we did go through for our FHA loan, he also got arrested for selling bad loans. Do your research. For those not familiar with loans, at 25% the repayment would be a little over $1.3 million over 25 years. Had company I worked for bought by another. The handover included new contracts for all staff with the new owners. I went through every word, and glad I did, as one clause gave the new owners rights over any IP I had ever had. If I had a patent from before I even worked for the previous company, I was signing away all rights to it to the new owners without any compensation. This included if they ever moved into a new area of business. So, if I suddenly got successful in another field outside of work time and nothing to do with their business, they were allowed to just start a new field of endeavor and take everything from me. I'm extra glad I did check, because they later proved to be deceitful and dishonest. Kept on changing our salary payments, super contributions, accidentally forgetting to pay us, all sorts of stupid stuff. We were getting ready to move from the US Midwest to one of the US island territories back in 2000. We had 5 cell phones that I was going to have to cancel and I was looking at some hefty cancellation fees. Then I remembered a clause, not in the contract, but that was printed on our bill a month or 2 earlier. Previously they had not charged per minute rates for calls if they were automatically forwarded from the cell number to another number. I had mine set up to transfer to my landline. The notice had 2 important points. First, they would now charge for the duration of the call even if it was forwarded. Second, if I didn't agree to those terms, I could terminate the contract with no penalties. Remembering that, I saw that saved me almost $1,000 in termination fees. I was prepared for a hassle when I contacted them, but the termination went smoothly. I moved to Southeast Asia to work as a teacher. In the contract that they originally emailed me, they offered $1,000 to cover my moving costs. Really, that was just barely more than my one-way ticket, but at least I wouldn't lose money. When I arrived, they gave me a copy of the contract to officially sign, but I noticed that there were fewer total enumerated points on that contract than on the one emailed to me. I looked more closely, and they had removed the provision for $1,000 moving costs. I know Southeast Asian culture, so I knew blowing up wouldn't get me anywhere. I played it off as a mistake and calmly insisted on signing a printed off version of the one emailed to me. I got that $1,000, but thank goodness I read the contract again. When I finished high school I had to have a gap year and earn $26K in 12 months to be declared as independent in order to get or study. Government pays you to study and move to university. Got a 12-month job and read the contract extensively because I needed to be making at least $500 a week. Job was paying $550 a week, so signed the contract and went to work. My first payslip was $310. Mind you, this was tarring roads for 40+ hours a week, so this was taxing work for so little money. Demanded for 6 months to get a copy of my contract, but the traineeship agency wasn't responding. Had to do extra work on the weekends at Subway to get my weekly earnings up. Eventually the general manager called me and set up a meeting with me. Said this was a frick up and they'll back pay me and start paying me what I signed up for. People got fired for letting it go for so long. I can't believe this. To fix this, someone has to go and ask for a bunch of money for an abnormal payout, and that raises questions. A lease I once had said, the landlord agrees, at the renter's expense, to blah blah, with the blah blah being a list of deep cleaning services to be completed at the end of the lease, likely meant hundreds of dollars worth. I went to a reasonably well advertised jewelry store to pick up an engagement ring, knowing that I wanted it to be a surprise, and that she would want to pick out her own ring at due time. I made sure that the ring would be returnable for full price, and even for a full refund from that store when I bought it for about $900. After the proposal, my then fiancée found a ring she liked better at a different jeweler, so I went to return the ring. When I said I wanted to return the ring, the clerk said no problem, just sign this and we'll get you sorted out. I read the small paper, and it stated something very close to I now confirm this sale to be a final sale, and cannot be refunded or returned for any reason. I read it, pen in hand, looked at her, and said why would I sign that? She took the slip back, got to her manager, and I was able to get the full amount returned via the same way I paid, on my debit card. For those interested, it was a People's Jewelers in Vancouver. 2 years ago I went to buy a used car. I really liked it. Test drove it twice, and went in for the paperwork. They ran the numbers and gave me the paperwork to review. I busted out my phone and started doing the math on it using one of those websites that calculates auto financing and interest for you. I did the math with the website and on my own 3 separate times while they stared me down. The numbers didn't add up. Turns out, they had it set up that payments wouldn't officially kick in until 60 months but would still be accruing interest that entire time. Screw that. That and the fact that I caught the salesman lying to me on all kinds of things like this unused space behind the engine is specifically so if you're in a crash, there will be room for it so it won't hit you. No, jackass. It's a low-end model with a tiny engine. Don't try and sell this as a safety feature. Ugh. Anyways, walked out from them and got a lot of passive-aggressive and even threatening texts in the following days. Screw them. I noticed a lot of contracts have the following clause. You can cancel when your contract is up for renewal, but if you fail to do so, your contract renews for another year. I set several reminders to prevent that auto-renew thing from kicking in. I once had a subscription to a service I no longer wanted that was going to auto-renew on a Sunday. I logged in to cancel the day before and see the auto-renew had already gone through. Turned out they round back to the closest business day if the auto-renew is scheduled to happen on a weekend holiday. I raised heck and got a refund, but come on, that's just shady. Looked at renting a house about 7 years ago, and the homeowner had inserted some of her own clauses into the standard tenancy agreement. Now this is absolutely fine to do, but they were purposefully put into different sections of the document. So if you read the part detailing security deposit, you wouldn't see her additions as she put them in another area on the paperwork. One clause was that no footwear of any kind can be worn inside the property. Failure to adhere to this will mean the whole property's carpeting must be professionally cleaned. Another was the waiving of the mandatory notice period before the homeowner can come by and inspect the property. There's supposed to be a minimum amount of time they must give you notice-wise before they can come over unless there is a serious property fault, leak etc. So that they can't just turn up unannounced. She wanted that waived so she could check we were treating her property right. and if we weren't then we'd be immediately evicted. I also caught her telling a relative that she registers eviction proceedings upon the start of the tenancy so she can evict them as soon as she decides they've broken her rules. There was a mandatory waiting period between commencement of eviction proceedings and being able to actually get enforcement officers to evict a tenant. Not sure of the current rules on this anymore, as I don't have as much to do with rental properties now. Noped out of that house really quickly and got a much bigger, cheaper house, albeit more of a death trap, a few streets away. She registers eviction proceedings upon the start of the tenancy so she can evict them as soon as she decides they've broken her rules. Even in my landlord-friendly state that isn't how it works. I just bought a used car and my wife and I had to bring our newborn. She hadn't pooped all day and I knew from her doing it the day earlier that a monster crap was brewing. Well, it happened in the finance office and she crap all over me. Now just before this we talked about the $250 cancellation option. How I didn't want it. How I sold cars in my past. We had a good conversation about it. Well, this jabroni give my wife a digital paper to sign to reject it and zooms in to help her sign but is really obscuring the fact he had her sign for it. After I emerged from the bathroom, covered in watered down crap, I read the whole long form and caught it. He pretended not to know what the charge was. Then he said it will take hours to manually redo. I told him to get to it. It didn't take hours. I didn't know about the signature until after I got home because he gave me a digital copy of that on a USB drive. When I got home and looked over the digital part of the contract I was floored to see and put together what happened. This ashat saw us struggling with our new baby and thought he could steal $250 from us to pad the back end. Ah, that old trick. I was actually taught by that in my car rental days. Include the insurance and of course say you must have fat fingers and hit the wrong button. Haha. Put a $20k deposit on a house. When we went to meet with the kitchen subcontractor to pick our appliances, he told us he couldn't order them until he got paid by the contractor for back $sign owed. Turns out the contractor couldn't pay his bills. When I went to the real estate agency that we bought through, looking for my deposit back, they told me the contractor had the cash. There was nothing I could do. I was not happy, so I started digging a bit and watching the house and the listings. Within a week they had another deposit on the house. What I learned from my digging was this: it's extremely illegal to take and hold two deposits on the same property. Armed with this knowledge, I paid another visit to the real estate agency and told them they just violated the law, and their choice was get me my money or deal with the cops and every legal agency involved in real estate regulations in the state. Had my money back 2 days later, but only after telling the contractor no to a personal check. Recently, I just started a new job and the employee agreement said I wasn't eligible for overtime, but it was something I 100% confirmed I was eligible for, and it was in my job offer letter. I pointed it out on the spot and HR crossed it out and initialed it. She claimed she must have grabbed the wrong agreement by mistake. I hope there wasn't anything else in the agreement that didn't pertain to me. It did have a forced arbitration clause that I'm still unhappy about, but this job is just a stepping stone for me. Check up thread, I think your HR rep posted, too. I got a job offer from a company that I had never heard of but had a decent salary. I was reading the contract and if I ended up quitting before my 2-year anniversary of the company I would need to pay them back for every cent I earned and pay them a fee for the training they would give me. I am so glad that I look more into that contract other than the salary. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.